Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're starting to fill up here. We'll give it a second. Thank you so much for being on time. All right.
Hi, Michelle.
Great. Very
Hi.
good. All right. Yeah, there we go. More people coming on in. All right. Okay, well, I'm sure there are going to be some more people coming in. Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you can just continue. Well, wait a minute. Oh, no. There's a big wave of people. Excuse me.
Dylan, why don't you make me co-host and then I can futz around with admitting people from the weight room and all that.
Oh, you bet. Oh, hi. I hear you, Gonzalo. I don't see you yet. Oh, okay. Yeah, I just jumped up by 100 people. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Am I still a host or did someone else become host?
Cedric's still the host. So Cedric, if you want to make Gonzalo co-host.
Yeah.
But I can keep admitting people as well.
Fantastic. All right. Yeah, the number's starting
All
to
right,
look
man. I
like.
didn't know you were there.
That's all right. Hi, Gonzalo.
Hi.
Okay. Well, no, I'll just give it a second. Yeah, we still have a couple more coming in. All right, that's looking great because there's a little bit of a lag. All right, welcome everyone. It is the evening of day 2. What a big Tuesday. You were in 2 different tracks today and everybody's going to swap. So tomorrow you'll have a very different experience. But I hope you enjoyed today. I had the honor and pleasure of being with many of you in Stand and Deliver, and I can't wait to meet sections 1, 2, and 5 tomorrow. I got to meet sections 3 and 4 today. And but we're all together tonight. And this is a very special treat. We haven't had a keynote speaker in several years. So this is a formal moment within Leadership Foundations that we haven't had for a couple of years. So we're bringing this back, and we could not be more happy to introduce you to Michele Havens. Obviously, Michele is an alum of Anderson and of the Fully Employed MBA program of FEMBA. And, you know, she embodies a lot of what our commitment is for you this week. You know, the faculty, the staff, the alumni, the students, the Anderson Village, we're all committed that you launch the next week, the next month, this fall quarter, the first year, and the whole experience, that you can fulfill on the whole opportunity set of life in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And we feel with Michele that we have a wonderful example of operating on all cylinders, of investing in graduate education, and she's an enhancer. We're going to say more about that, and taking the education back to her firm where she has been, Northern Trust, where she's been since during school and now 15 years after graduation. I'll tell you some of her formal accolades in a moment. But in addition to great professional success, she's built her family, and she's a very active philanthropic person, you know, active in boards and leadership opportunities in our community. So Michele is who we want you to be in your expression, in your life, with your unique circumstances, but she represents that upward trajectory that we want for you. And so we're calling this is a three-part event. This is a keynote interview. We're combining those 2 themes to keep it interactive. And then we're going to have the second half really be interactive Q&A, where we'll let you ask questions. We're not going to bombard her with hundreds of questions. We're going to call on you, and you'll get to ask in the first person. So you get to hear directly from Michele. So we're thrilled to have this. So let me just introduce. Michele is the president of the West Region of Northern Trust. She's responsible for leading the company's wealth management business in the Western United States. This is a new promotion that she's held since March of last year. Prior to that, she served as the president of the Southern California region. She was responsible then for the investment management, trust, estate, private, and business banking business. She works with high net worth families and their related charitable entities to bring an uncompromising focus on the clients. And this is a quote. This is a quote from Michele. Wealthy families want their children to enjoy the family's wealth and have fulfilling experiences, but don't want them to become demotivated. Those who succeed teach their children to earn rewards. So, you know, money doesn't solve everything. Mo money, mo problems. There's a famous quote, right? And she's in that world. So she's a guide for people. So educationally, she has a Bachelor of Arts in Finance from Boston College, and obviously her MBA from UCLA Anderson. She was voted by her classmates as the most valuable student in her class. She gave the commencement address. She was our FEMBA Council President for the class of 2005. She's also a lifelong learner. She is a certified financial planner. After Anderson, she attended Harvard Business School's postgraduate executive education program for members of the Young Presidents Organization. And a couple of accolades, she has many. In 2019 and 2020 both, the Los Angeles Business Journal named Michele a top woman in banking. And the community involvement that I spoke to, she's on the board of advisors for the UCLA Anderson School of Management. So she's now, as a student, she was helping be the voice of leadership for the student body, and now as an alum, she's again paying it forward, bringing her leadership back to the strategic running of our school. From 2014 to 2018, she served on the board of directors for YPO Los Angeles, where she chaired the membership committee in 17 and 18. She's the second vice president on the board of the Jonathan Club and a former board member of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. She's also involved in the Los Angeles Women's Leadership Council. A couple other things from her time at Anderson. I printed this off very small, so excuse me while I squint. Her Gap company was from Australia. She went to Melbourne and Sydney when she did her research trip with the Global Access Program, and she worked on what was basically an Apple TV prototype. Her husband went on the trip too, so don't forget, those of you with husbands, wives, boyfriends, and girlfriends, you can take them with you on these trips around the world. She was a fan of Eric Sussman's real estate class. She was, as I said, FEMBA Council class president, and she was active on the Women's Leadership Council. And one of the gifts of my life is I got to spend about an hour with Michele last week as we prepared for this. And full disclosure, we do exchange holiday letters every year, her family and mine. So I'm a big fan, big fan. So anything else I cannot read because I'm old and blind. Oh yeah, this I love. She relocated to Seattle with work while pregnant and took a risk to do that. She came back to Los Angeles with 2 children, not yet in school. And when they asked us to come back, you know, it was like, do we make the move again? But all those risks paid off, and it was actually pretty smooth. And her career has just continued to grow. But she's not a person who stayed in one place. She has reached for it, grabbed for it, and created a career that's really meritorious of your time and attention for this next hour. So I'm trying to tell you she's great and she's worth listening to, and there's a lot to learn. So we welcome Michele Havens, the longest introduction in the history of introductions. Welcome, Michele. Hi.
Hi, Dylan, and thank you all for having me. It's a true honor to somewhat come full circle, if you will, and be able to connect with all of you. I want to congratulate you and welcome you to UCLA Anderson. You're now part of an incredible community and a vibrant network, and I recognize that many of you probably already appreciate that, but while people think about business school in the spirit of building their careers, I like to think about it in the spirit of building your future. So congratulations for all of you. You had a choice, and I'm excited to be part of the team to welcome you.
Well, I am thrilled that they get to hear you in person, first person. And I'm kind of curious. I think this might actually be a little bit more intimate than if you were talking to us in Corn Hall. So you know, it's fun with Zoom because we can kind of look each other in the eye. So so I have about 5 questions, and these questions are sort of a combination of Gonzalo, Dean Fratius, and Professor Dye, and then Michele and I, we kind of put that all together, and we didn't know if we were going to do the formal keynote or we're kind of doing a blend. But I think to open, you know, like, when people ask, well, tell me about yourself. How do you usually introduce yourself, just to give people a sense of kind of your upbringing and and a little bit about your backstory to do the LA thing.
Sure. Well, you obviously gave a fair amount of background based on my career, but I think probably what makes sense to kind of fill in is a little bit of why I got into this particular industry and my journey. So I grew up outside of Boston, about an hour south of the city, and I was effectively the first person in my family to go to college. I grew up in a blue collar family. My parents were certainly hardworking people. But I saw how money became a little bit of a stress on them. And I was fascinated by that in conjunction with the media at the time. You know, this group is clearly too young to remember Family Ties, but Michael J. Fox is probably a name that you all know. And I found his characters perhaps to be intriguing to me. You know, Bright Lights, Big City was a movie that, you know, really made New York as a city kind of a sexy place to be. And there was Wall Street and some other interesting things going on. And it just seemed like people who followed a certain path, you know, had more freedom with money. And while, you know, I didn't go for without a lot, we didn't travel outside of what you could get in a car to do. And the one trip we actually made to Disneyland was a defining moment because we got there and the travel agent had kind of stolen our money. So money was just this theme that I thought, you know, I'm going to figure this out. And so that was why I was pretty clear when I decided to go to, you know, on to college or to choose what I wanted to study, that I would pursue business. And anyway, was always hardworking, got into my stretch school, which at the time was is Boston College, and joined their School of Management. So decided right away to kind of get a trade. And that was what we did where I grew up. I was in a blue collar town. To give you perspective, there were 325 students in my graduating class, and there were probably about 35 of them that went on to four-year college. So it wasn't common that you would go and get an advanced degree. There were some folks that did a associate degree or some kind of vocational learning after that. So very clear on what my direction was, which at the time, just to keep it simple, was Wall Street. I got involved in doing some internships in school. Went into the city of Boston and worked at Prudential Securities and Smith Barney, literally doing free intern work, phone calling, cold calling, photocopying newspaper articles that people wanted. And a lot of my friends made fun of me because I was already in my navy blue jacket with my pleated skirt, carrying a briefcase while they were all going to a party. But I offered that as context for, you know, it's always been in my DNA that I wanted to be in this business. And I actually, in the spirit of leadership, learned a lot about what I didn't want to do as a consequence of some of those internships and those experiences and the culture of those environments, which we can get into maybe a little bit later. But the beauty of building relationships is that, you know, obviously people look out for you down the road. And so my story was I was going to information sessions at the undergraduate level my sophomore and junior year before most people in that particular, you know, year of school were even thinking about jobs. And I met a woman at JP Morgan in the information session, and we got acquainted my sophomore year. And clearly I was, you know, early in the process and always hung in the back of the room with respect to letting the seniors have the time. And bottom line, you know, when it came to senior year to pull resumes for interviews, I'm very confident Carol Schaefer was her name, made sure that my resume got pulled. And so, I mean, that was the beginning of my path to getting to the goal that I had set for myself. And I went on the on-campus interviewing and started my first job with JP Morgan. I had some wonderful experiences there. You talked a little bit about travel. Back when banks were having fairly attractive recruiting programs, you got to go abroad, and with good work, I got to live in Milan for a year with them. I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil for 6 months and spent some time in London, all knowing that I wanted to kind of land something more permanently in the private bank, which is where I ended up working on a bit of a startup for JP Morgan. This was in the late 90s, so they weren't acquired by Chase until 2000. And anyway, we were building kind of a down market business for them, if you will. So they were seeing these baby boomers becoming millionaires through the dot-com bubble and wanted to lower their minimums effectively to capture that market share. So Working hard. I remember, we were in first thing in the morning and would walk home at 10:30. I ended up meeting my husband. We were on the same team. And so that was a little bit of, the next part of my journey, which was he was offered an opportunity in Los Angeles and we relocated to LA. Both of us were from the East Coast and had no connections here. So that was a bit of an adventure. And JP Morgan couldn't offer me a comparable job because, as I had described it, we were working in a more entrepreneurial environment that couldn't be recreated outside of headquarters. So that was in 2000. And basically, I submitted my resumes and applied to some things online and didn't hear back. Some of them I did interview with, but many folks actually said I needed an MBA. And I remember kind of filing that away because I had already started my career in private banking. And I thought, why do I need an MBA? I really want to get experience and just stay in this particular field. But nonetheless, I filed that away, which obviously, I pursued. And again, back to the navy blue suit, which I put on for you all today. I walked into the Northern Trust office, which was in Westwood, actually, at Wilshire and Glendon for this audience. And I left my resume with the receptionist. And I said, I'm looking for a job in investments. And it happened that the receptionist at the time was an investment associate covering a break for the receptionist. She brought the resume right on back to the chief investment officer, who gave me a call the next day. And my 20-year career at Northern Trust started with that. So it's a little bit of, unconventional approaches to job searches. And I've seen a few in my position as someone who's capable of hiring, but, that's basically how I got to Northern. And then, as you said, Dylan, have had some incredible experiences from there. So I'll pause because I know that was a long setup, but it certainly fills in the other, 20 years of my life, 25 before we got to LA.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll maybe tell a tiny bit out of, I want to talk about your coming to UCLA Anderson, but the name of the week is Leadership Foundations. And, you and I talked through the summer, and I know you actually did write a keynote address. So I just want to really publicly appreciate your time. We felt this conversation might communicate a little more, but, the name of your thinking was, leading from the seat that you are in. And I just loved what you shared with me last week about that, because we all start from somewhere. And this is the class of 2023, and every person here is starting from where they are. So could you share with us some of the thoughts on leadership? Because again, that's what the week is about. It's launching their discovery during school and beyond. Could you share some of your thoughts on leadership? Because you're a person who's done it and you're still doing it.
Well, and I think that's the point that I wanted to make. We are all students of leadership, and I am constantly learning and growing. So it was very humbling to think about, how I could frame up a conversation on leadership for all of you. And, it's clear in this moment in time, now more than ever, we need leaders who demonstrate wisdom and courage. And we've got a backdrop of uncertainty and difficult times. And so one of my favorite expressions that some of you in the room who I know are also Northern Trust employees probably have heard, but it's lead from the seat that you're in. Because for this audience in particular, all of you can contribute to your organizations, to your communities in different ways. And you don't have to have a title or a hierarchical level of responsibility to really drive change. And I'm excited because as I look out at this group, I think, you in fact are responsible for the innovation and the evolution and the efficiencies that this particular moment in time is only accelerating. So there's certainly tremendous leadership in this room that frankly, I hope to learn from as well. But, I did prepare some things that I wanted to convey, and, that courage and wisdom piece resonated with me, and it sort of was sparked a little bit by one of Franklin D. Roosevelt's quotes that came out around the time of the Great Depression. And I do love quotes and tend to collect them. And he said, "There's no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously." And so, having participated in the Anderson program myself and studied leadership, that certainly is advice that I think, is important for us to recognize. Dylan, if I may, I did create sort of, if you will, because I think all good messages have themes. I took 6 in this case, if you will, so bear with me. But I think you'll catch on, to where I'm going with this as advice for you as leaders. The first is innovate and experiment. And I think that's probably obvious, particularly given the times that we're in. But I have to say that I've found evidence of this in so many areas. And most recently, as a mother, I have a 13-year-old daughter who's entering 8th grade and an 11-year-old son who's entering 5th grade. And as an example of little things that this moment in time is allowing us to do, it's a school system that has customarily had teachers, even in some of the cases that you all can, imagine as entering MBA students, where they would lecture, right? You'd have a lecture and then you'd get a test, and that was how you learn. Well, in this moment in time, our children's school has decided to embrace team-based learning and project-based learning using design thinking, where they're basically going to take these 5th graders and 8th graders and give them a similar theme and ask them to spend time in a 4-week window integrating all of the arts and sciences and social studies into a project. And I just thought, wow, that is really innovative, particularly in education where, I think any of us can recognize has had some traditional elements to it, certainly not business school or UCLA Anderson for that matter. But, as we stereotype the education that our children are receiving across the country, that was just one small example where I thought, that's leadership, innovating and experimenting in a way that we can adapt and use design thinking. The second one was providing clarity. Now more than ever, people tend to fear the worst. And so if you can present a clear challenge of the circumstances without sugarcoating, I think that's the other piece of this, is you really have to be authentic, compassionate, and empathetic in your messaging. But more than ever, people want you to explain why things are being done and that you care about them. So that was sort of my second message, if you will, on leadership. And the third is about being decisive. Embracing action and ambiguity is really important to differentiate the leaders from the followers right now, because stress and anxiety is among all of us, whether you're in the grocery store these days or in the classroom working on team-based learning. And so I think, my tip there was an article I read in the Wall Street Journal last week, where the article was titled, I think in the personal journal section, "The one thing you can control now is yourself." And the exercise they walked through was taking a blank sheet of paper, drawing a line down the middle, writing on the left-hand side all the things you can't control. In a COVID environment, you feel like there are many, and then all the things that you can control. And, every crisis has a moment of opportunity, and you too can help create clarity and I think level set. The one sort of story that I thought, was a great example of being decisive for all of you sports fans, Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA, I'll never forget, I was at an event. It was either the Wednesday or maybe even Thursday, March 12th. And before governments had advised people to stay at home, the NBA shut down because of the risk of mass transmission and large events. And I thought, wow, that's really an example of leadership. Acknowledging fears was the fourth one. And that gets back to some of the authentic, compassionate, and empathetic leadership that I described. As someone leading a large organization right now, it's critically important that we understand what our employees are going through and what fears and anxieties they have. I told you about my children's school. It's all being delivered via Zoom. And as a working mother, and all of you who are fully employed obviously know that your colleagues are also dealing with these types of challenges, whether it's children or elder care or exposure. And I think it's critically important to be able to address that with your people and your teams in a way, knowing some folks are single and they're living alone, these are difficult times. So acknowledging fears to me was a critical part of leadership, particularly in this moment. And the segue to that is the fifth one, which is being visible. Communicating at the same time at regular intervals. Some might suggest you use the same medium. You see that a little bit in our government leaders who are using television. So, you know, there was a period where every day at 3 o'clock, I turned on the news and could expect the lineup of, you know, the president, Gavin Newsom at 12:30, and then Eric Garcetti. And so I think being visible in that type of leadership role is about largely, you know, tweeting. But for all of us, it's picking up the phone, because I think that's a medium, and I'm addressing it to all of you who I imagine still rely on texting and memes and email even to build relationships and go deep. Because I think that's the other piece of this, that's one of the silver linings, is you can learn more about folks by doing a face-to-face video call where you can see their dog or their children are running in the background, or there's something about their home that you can engage in conversation. So be visible is the message there. They want to know that you're fighting in the trenches with them and that you understand. And then the sixth piece that I thought, particularly as a leader in this moment, is prioritizing self-care. And I mean that not just for yourself, but for your people. A crisis, you know, we have the adrenaline rush and the momentum that carries us through, but it's both mentally and physically exhausting, and emotionally too. So as they say, you know, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first before you can help others. And as a leader, I have prioritized that as well. I just had the benefit of actually traveling to Rhode Island, where all of our family is, you know, kind of in that Massachusetts, Rhode Island area. And it was important that I lead by example, that anyone can take a vacation, even if they have to be improvising on staycation and other things. And I thought, you know, Andrew Cuomo has done this well. If you watch the New York governor and his relationship with his brother and their banter, you know, he tells people to take a walk or call mom. And so, you know, there's little things that we can all do, gratitude lists, spending time with loved ones. And I think that's something that we need to continue to nurture and support as long as we have less freedom than we're accustomed to. So those are some of my key themes for all of you from a leadership perspective.
Well, thank you, Michelle. They're going, you know, they're going to write their leadership practice plan this week, and that's 6 wonderful areas: innovate, experiment, provide clarity, be decisive, acknowledge fear, be visible, prioritize care, self-care, team care, you know, build a healthy atmosphere around oneself. So it's a lot that they could work with. So this is the out of sequence part. So, you know, I don't want people to be so intimidated or impressed with you that they can't see that they could get from where they are now to where you are 15 years, 18 years from now, counting the time in school. So out of sequence, you know, tell them a little bit about your application to Anderson. You know, like, you didn't necessarily just walk in, you know, it was a little bit of a thing. And this is before I was in charge. So these are people who obviously didn't know what they were doing. No, my predecessors were very wise, but if you would be so kind.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about it, because I think you're right. You know, even as a mother and as a leader, I talk about learning from failures and, you know, setbacks that we all overcome. And we talk about grit when we're talking about hiring people, like who's really had some kind of setback. I often ask, what is the greatest challenge that you've ever had to overcome? Because it tells you a lot about a person's character. So listen, I've had many more blessings than I have challenges in my life. And so I'm grateful for that. But I didn't get into UCLA Anderson the first time I applied. I was actually waitlisted. And so after that advice I had gotten during my recruiting, I was like, I'm not going to USC. Like, I work in Westwood. This is the better school. I'm just going to take that stinking GMAT test again and reapply and do it early. Because back then it was also, as I understood it, rolling admission. And if you waited to the last minute, it wasn't going to happen. So that's the story that Dylan's referring to. But yeah.
Well, and I just appreciate, like, you know, we're all a work in progress, and leadership begins with leading ourselves. You know, first we start to believe in ourselves, and then they want to believe in us also. And you stuck it out, and I love grit. That's wonderful. So that was getting into FEMBA. So now you're you're on the board. So what, as an alum, 15 years later, as an active business leader in Los Angeles, what does FEMBA mean to you now, 15 years after graduation?
Well, I remember that one of the most valuable parts of the program was the study group. And that's certainly something that has shown up in different forms and will continue, because team-based learning is how we operate. And one of the quotes, in the spirit of my favorite quotes, that hangs on my wall actually in my office in Century City that I've been to twice in 7 months, is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so, everything we're doing right now is a analogy, or the metaphor is the rowing one, right? Everyone's in a boat, and that collective energy is propelling us forward and making us stronger. And frankly, that was something that I learned a great deal about at Anderson, because I didn't love everybody in my study group. We didn't all see things the same way. And, I know diversity is also something we'll talk about, but that's how you get, as you know, to better outcomes. And, to the extent that I had advice for all of you, I'm a believer in, and what we call it in our culture is carefrontational. Everything shouldn't be harmonious, because if that's the case, then it's probably not working, or you don't have enough diversity. And so I would say that conflict sparks the creative process and allows you to brainstorm. So continue to challenge each other. There's a bit of a tool that they use in improv, knowing that the idea is to take someone's foundation and build upon it. And I think study group work is largely like that. What you want to avoid when you're thinking about team-based work, and again, kind of early days of Anderson, is the but. Someone brings up an idea and you say but. So my sort of challenge to all of you is to say yes and to build upon each other's ideas, to help each other grow, not to avoid conflict, but to establish trust, and to know that you genuinely care in one another. I remember when we did leadership foundations, we had the ropes course, right? So you got everybody over the wall. Some of that stuff is like trying to sing Kumbaya, and it can be a little hokey. But I think if you can get real in your relationships with people to build authentic trust by, carefrontational conversations, they didn't do their preparation for the assignment, whatever, they're talking while they're not supposed to be, in a group setting in person, or goofing around multitasking. I say, team-based work is something you all need to do for the rest of your life increasingly, and using mobile technology. So this is a perfect time to embark on this journey in this format, and the world is here. So teams would be my key learning 15 years later.
I love it. And you alluded to it in advance. Professor Dye wanted to make sure, I did ask, there's like the philosophy of diversity, and then there's being a decision maker and turning the levers and pulling the knobs to have an organization grow. And you've done some incredible work, and you in Northern Trust, right? You have, so tell people, like, practically, as a leader, as a president, what does diversity look like from your perspective now?
Well, I can speak from my perspective at Northern Trust, and I would say diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a strategic priority long before the murder of George Floyd. In fact, when they say, you have to see it to be it, or to believe that you can be it, that's been my experience at Northern 20 years ago. In fact, Sherry Barrett, who was on the board of, it was called Board of Visitors at the time, now it's Board of Advisors, she had the job that I have. And I literally remember one day asking her assistant to put me on her calendar for 30 minutes to talk about how I had aspirations of one day having that job. Now, I frankly didn't know that I did, but one thing about me is I always want the opportunity. And in the spirit of counsel to all of you around your careers, I think keeping your options open is another sort of nugget of advice. But going back to diversity, organizations really think about it from a gender and racial diversity perspective right now, largely. Again, at Northern today, I did take a moment to look this up, but we have 11 members of our management group, and 5 of them are diverse. 3 are women, and 2 are African-American men. And so, to have a 45% diverse management group and a bank today is quite an accomplishment. Now, listen, we still have a lot of work to do. And it is definitely something that through, recruiting and internships, and we have affinity groups that we refer to as business resource councils and ongoing, training, if you will. I just sponsored the Women's Leadership Development Forum in our organization, and we're looking to do something similar for our Black population. Those are things that, all organizations are obviously focused on as much as ever, but to me, it's exciting because we are a 130-year organization. We've been around for 130 years, and we have a Midwestern-based culture. And we tend to be pretty conservative, but we have consistently recognized the benefits of diversity, and we've got work to do. But I would say one other story that I could offer you is I have a board of my clients who are effectively advising us informally. We call it our West Region Advisory Board and their clients. And I brought them all to Chicago to meet with some of our senior leadership. And it was a 1.5-day session. And the first meeting was with the CEO of the company. And he said, when he sat down with the group, I have to apologize for the lack of diversity on your agenda. I'm the only white male you'll be meeting with in your 1.5 days. And it was funny because I looked at him and I looked at everybody in the room and I thought, wow, I looked down at the agenda that I had constructed based on the head of strategy or head of asset management or chief financial officer. And all of these people were, representing diversity. And so we've got work to do. It's not, perfect by any stretch, but I am very proud. And I would say that's also one of the reasons why I'm still there after 20 years and felt no need to change careers or leave the organization after getting my MBA. So sorry, get passionate about Northern Trust.
Well, it's funny. I celebrated my 18th anniversary last week. Everybody's like, oh, in this day and age, you have to have 14 employers. And then sometimes accidentally you find a place where you fit. That can happen also. So, well, I have 1 or 2 more questions, but I want to open it up to the floor. So we've got about 20 minutes and I see some hands going up, but here's the thing, we're going to have more hands than we get to call on, obviously. So just, as you're thinking about a question, think about a question on behalf of your classmates, right? Just try to put the question in front of Michele. She's here because she cares about you. And if there's anything we haven't addressed yet, that's there for you, day 2 of your MBA journey. So let's see. So I see some hands going up. We'll go with Jared because his hand was up first. This is Jared Lopez. Please meet Michele Havens.
Hey, Michele. How's it going? Thank you for your time today. Really enjoyed your speech. My question goes from the beginning of your talk today when you're talking about your non-paid internships that you started with and seeing things in the culture that you didn't like, that you didn't want to see later in your career. What were those things? And in a management position, how have you influenced those things?
So thank you, Jared, for that question. So what I saw, because it was a brokerage environment that I was interning in, was very much driven by what, today we call individual contributors. So everybody was a producing person. And so they literally locked their office door at the end of the day because they didn't want somebody to steal their Rolodex of prospective clients and people they were calling on. And I mentioned teams. I've always been a team-based person. I started playing sports as a young child. I grew up in Boston. So from a team perspective, we're kind of obnoxious when it comes to championships. And those don't get done by individual contributors. Tom Brady doesn't win Super Bowls without the rest of the unit. And so I knew for me that the culture that I needed to be part of was going to be more collaborative and team-based. And so that informed me. I can't remember. Was there a second part to that question? What I didn't like.
What didn't you like? And yeah, what are you doing with your organization now because of that? Yeah.
Right. Well, as I said, at Northern, we are a very collaborative culture. And I think that's influenced by those Midwestern roots that I referred to. So it sort of works to help recognize that together, all boats rise with the tide. And I think that's a differentiator for how we service our clients as well. So it's a fairly healthy place to be in the financial services industry.
Thank you. You have some great quotes too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I will call on Luana. Luana, if you would like to ask your question, please.
Michelle, thank you so much. Love the passion. I would love to know how, and you were a super eager person work-wise, how was your juggling between FEMBA and work and moving careers? Any insights on that's going to be very helpful.
I'm happy to take that question. In fact, it sparks a story that Dylan loves. And I don't remember, I might have been on a panel years ago with the Women's Leadership Council at school. And I had to explain that, some people talk about date night in relationships or with the friends and family that they have, and that works for them. But I always found that, come whatever evening, particularly during the week, I was too tired for date night. So we made Sunday mornings kind of our ritual. And it was important to prioritize that time because there definitely is a lot of sacrifice when you're working full time and meeting with your study groups under the demands that the courses require and then taking the coursework. So, I think helping them understand what you're about to embark on through good communication, but also that commitment of prioritizing whatever window you can offer is clearly critical. And then candidly, I said this to Dylan, it was my choice. I chose to wait to have children until I put this accomplishment, if you will, behind me because I felt like it was more than I could personally handle. But that was also a source of tension because my husband's friends were already starting their families. So, it's not easy. It definitely takes sacrifice. But I think if you honor your commitments and you're present when you're with them, that's certainly one of the key ways of getting through it together.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Luana. How about Nahal? Nahal or Nahal?
Yeah, you got it right the first time. Thanks, Dylan. Thank you, Michelle, so much for the time today. I'm curious about how you leveraged all of the resources, particularly the career services function in the program as an enhancer. I'm one of the people who I feel like I'm very lucky to early on have found a place I love and I'm very passionate about, but want to make sure I'm making the most of that.
Yeah, sure. For me, I think one of the program's evolved in 15 years in response to the feedback we've offered. So for example, when I was there were very limited career services available because employers were often paying for your education. And so candidly, there's just a conflict of interest if they're underwriting your tuition and then the school helping you find another job. So I wouldn't say there was nothing available because that wasn't the case, but it wasn't the same. You couldn't participate in on-campus recruiting when I went to school. And so that has changed a little bit. In terms of getting involved, I think that's another thing that's really nice is there were more clubs that were not flexible for fully employed people. The activities and the events that they would host would be during the school day, during the work day while they were kind of on campus, if you will. And so I personally got involved with the FEMBA Student Council and, as you heard a little bit, really enjoyed that experience and it helps me get to connect with professors. And one of the other pieces of advice that I think relates a little bit to what you said is I said to Dylan, my preference was always to take professors, less emphasis on the class itself. Because in my experience, while they're all really strong, some are just more passionate about the in-room experience. And I found that to be really insightful and also kind of exciting because those are meaningful relationships that you develop along the way. And to your point, they know, they have the networks. They've seen the companies come through campus. They can advise you in a lot of cases based on your own experience. But building those relationships is part of the journey and one of the pieces that, I enjoyed quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nahal.
Dylan, the old-fashioned phone is ringing. Let me shut it off.
You bet. We lost our guest of honor. Welcome to life in COVID. And we got her back. Yay. let's see. I think next on the list
The
is,
funny thing is that was my husband calling the house, which never happened. So I hope he's okay. He may have has a flat tire on Sunset Boulevard. I don't know.
oh my God. Okay. Well, we won't, 15 more minutes and then we'll give you back to him. We don't want him to get a, he's
We're
already
good. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. He's on his way. We're good.
Okay, good. I think Andrew C is next. Andrew.
Hey, Michelle. Just to kind of echo what's been said, thank you so much for your time. Wanted to kind of step back to the fourth of the 6 items you mentioned, acknowledging fear. So it seems like you would want to acknowledge fear without seeming like a captain that's about to jump overboard of the ship, right? So kind of how do you find that balance? And, it seems like kind of a tricky balance to find.
I think it's trying to be fact-based and less emotional based. The example I'll give you is we have offices across the territory that I oversee where we have to have employees still coming in to maintain our operations. We're considered an essential service. And so you can imagine that when 95% of your workforce is told they can work from home and that other 5% has to come in, there's a lot of concern around how some way the organization values them less. And the facts are that they perform an essential service. Our obligation was to make sure that they had the utmost care. And so examples of what we did, which gets back to some of the action, is we put security guards in locations that hadn't customarily had them because our staffing levels were so much smaller. As you've seen, kind of plastic shields and all of those more, PPE related tools were accessible to them. And then we closed our offices with the exception of by appointment only on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 to 2. So where we had been open Monday through Friday, part of acknowledging their fears was we can manage who's coming in and out by requiring them to effectively schedule in advance. And then we would do the assessment that many, as you've seen now, query on travel and symptoms that would otherwise concern us. So that would be the example that I could offer you of how, acknowledging that those fears are real, taking all the necessary actions you can, and then really listening. There were some cases where people frankly had medical conditions where, they weren't permitted or able to safely come into the office. And so we had to acknowledge that and go to plan B.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's see. I think next is Freddie C.
Hi, Michelle. Really appreciate your time here and giving us your insight. My question was mostly around growth because at least at my point in my career, I feel like I can understand growth at kind of a quantifiable level. If I'm in sales, I've closed X many more leads. If I'm an engineer, I've done this many tickets, I've built this many things. So I'm kind of curious, like at your level, when you get to be, managing the entire Western region for Northern Trust, how do you measure your own growth and how do you ensure that, you keep growing every day and don't plateau at any point?
So I love that question. For me, I've always been, as Dylan said in the opening, genuinely a lifelong learner. So this morning, in between my exercise class, I was listening to a podcast. I was in a waiting room with my son at a doctor's appointment, and I read 90 pages of a book that was, effectively on leadership, sort of looking for my own inspiration, coming to all of you today to see what nuggets, had I overlooked. And I think it's, also being willing to take the risks that I mentioned. For me, one of the greatest challenges was using a video format to communicate with my region for the first time. I had done conference calls and live broadcasts, but never something that was effectively scripted so much that I didn't want to read it. But yet, there's a teleprompter. And so I think every day I'm putting myself out there in a way that's trying and experimenting and surrounding myself with people that are going to tell me what they really think. Because that's the other thing that I fear a great deal of is, and I will give you this nugget. So one of my favorite quotes is, managers talk to you, mentors talk with you, and sponsors talk about you. I'm gonna say that again. Managers talk to you, mentors talk with you, and sponsors talk about you. And that's relevant because my boss sits in Chicago. He doesn't see me in action every day. So the feedback he can give me is based on the sound bites of a lot of people. My mentor and sponsor was the gentleman that I effectively replaced. And so I'm a bit absent, if you will, of that day-to-day coaching, but still call on him when I need guidance and advice. And so to your question around growth, it's recognizing a hairy situation. I have difficult management scenarios today where I'm helping people think strategically and challenging them to push their own edge, and doing that in a way that ultimately it should be their idea. So I guess the short answer to your question is every day I see opportunities to learn, grow, and get better, communicating, listening, all things that none of us perfect. But I like to say too, progress, not perfection. I'm going to evolve and grow as long as it's directionally correct. That's my objective.
Got it. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have about 9 minutes left, so I'm not going to get to everyone. And Gonzalo, I know you're out there. I didn't know if there's anything maybe that I just want to put it out there if there's anything that you would like, as a faculty member that we would address possibly.
No, I think Michele has covered some great things, and I'm glad that they asked you about career because our program evolves, and that's one of the areas where we evolved tremendously to address the needs of the students compared to the days when you were here. And so it's, it goes back to what you're saying about innovating and changing and doing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming, Michele. We love hearing from you always.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, well, we'll do one or two more questions and then, maybe leave a little space, Michele, if you'd like to have any sort of closing thoughts with us. Let's see, how about Andres? Andres, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Michele. Thank you for your insights. So, I think the faculty has made it, very clear with this week that, the goal is that we become true leaders, not just managers, not just, but actual leaders throughout their careers. I'm curious, at what point in your career do you feel like you finally internalized that concept of leadership and you were able to look at yourself and say, yeah, like I'm a leader now, like what did it take to get there?
It's a great question. And I would probably go back to my quote, in hindsight, I don't know that I realized the impact I was having on other people. But here's what I would say to you as I offer you all advice when you go back to your work environments tomorrow or whenever next week. And this came from a mentor. So Bob Eckert, who actually is someone I got to know originally through UCLA Anderson. He was on that board of advisors that I described. He's the former CEO of Mattel. And he's a dear friend, and he was on our advisory board for a number of years. And he said to me, Michele, do people want to work for you? As you interact with people in your organization and you think about the impact that you want to continue to have by taking on more traditional hierarchical leadership roles, I think that's one way to kind of frame in your own mind if you show up as your best self. And it doesn't have to be something that you put out there because it may sound a little off-putting or even arrogant, but I have given that coaching to certain members of our region because occasionally, they think they're really bright, but they're really strong individual contributors and the rest of the team doesn't exactly want to follow. And I think, that's one of the clear pieces around leadership. So I probably experienced that firsthand when I left. So after business school, I was relocated or given the opportunity to relocate to Seattle with Northern Trust. And that was their way of saying, LA is a really big market. We don't think you're ready for leadership here just yet. But if you're open to something new in a smaller market at the time and take that risk, I got management responsibility through that transition. And that was a little bit of the beginning of just having more self-awareness.
Thank you, Andres. So we're not going to get to everyone. I'll just kind of move around the list a little bit. Let me have the last question. We'll go to Sidi S.
Hi, Michele. Just like everyone said, thank you again for your time. Just piggybacking on Andres's question, once you realize that you are a leader, or while you were still on that journey of becoming a leader, how did you manage to keep your feelings separate from all the decision making and all the tough decisions that you had to make through your journey?
So the truth is, if you know me, and as you potentially could get more exposure, I'm not good at poker. I am pretty much as real and authentic as you get. I mean, from the facial expressions in a meeting to really just speaking from the heart. And so I have difficulty kind of differentiating those two things. And so that's where the emotion comes in. Increasingly, I've learned that the best way to process what's going on in my own emotional state is to ask more questions. Because one of the things I've learned this year in particular is what you say and what people hear are often incredibly different. And, I was saying provide clarity, like I haven't necessarily aced that. But as a leader, and I think, as an individual, if you sort of pause and you give it some time to think, or more importantly, you ask more questions, I think that's probably one of the key strategies that I've tried to use to manage that, difference between the emotions and action.
Good for that.
Thank you, Siddhi. I like that last question. Well, Michele, we're coming to the bottom of the hour. You have a family, and we've borrowed an hour of your Tuesday night, and we're very, very grateful for it. Anything you'd like to offer sort of as a conclusion or a summation?
Well, there were three things that I thought I would offer as my kind of principles. And listen, I think I want to just applaud and acknowledge all of you, because I say to folks in business, don't put your leadership journey on hold because you feel like this is a moment where you've got to hunker down and do something else. In fact, I was texting with one of you earlier today in this group, and I just honestly believe that now is the moment where this is your time. This is your platform. This is your opportunity. So you are the future of our businesses, our communities, and our industries. And I want you all to define who you want to be. So I loved hearing that exercise that you've got as one of your takeaways. But I encourage you to practice and experiment, to listen and to fail often. This is the safest environment. Take the person in your study group who hates public speaking the most and make them give the presentation, because this is your moment. The second one was, don't stop being stewards of leadership for each other, which is in fact my segue from investing in yourself to investing in each other. And I mentioned I'm a sports fan. I'm watching Hard Knocks right now, which, hopefully this group has got a little bit of interest in, because it's the LA Chargers and the LA Rams. And it's actually dropping tonight as another episode on Tuesdays. And there's this guy, number 58 for the LA Rams. His name is Clay Johnston. And he just exhibits positive energy and grit and leading from the seat that you're in, because the reality is the editors are setting him up not to make the team. But he's the kind of guy every day who day in and day out is going to give it his best shot, even if he only gets one or two plays. And so encourage each other to take that risk, to be supportive of one another, and to use this as a critical opportunity to experiment with things that you don't feel safely doing in your own work environments. And one of the quotes that came out of that one that I wrote down literally in the middle of the show was, iron sharpens iron. You can have a rivalry among people on your own team and still get better. And in this moment, these teams have no choice. They're not scrimmaging each other. So you should apply that to the work that you're doing. And then, the last one is just, again, a theme around the moment of taking advantage of the virtual. As I said to Dylan when we were having our pre-meeting, there are speakers that you can get access to right now that you probably never could. Either, most people are at home, or there's no expectation that they're going to travel. So use your own network to bring that to your professors, to bring it to each other, to engage in that feedback of helping make your learning experience that much more rewarding and valuable. So congratulations to all of you on taking the first step on this incredible experience, and all the best. I hope our paths cross. I know they will. I'll be on campus as soon as we all can. enjoying that beautiful new building that's waiting for us. So thank you for inviting me, Dylan. It's really been my honor.
Well, on behalf of all of us, yeah, we're grateful to have you. You know, like you said, if you can see it, you can be it. And, you know, not as a woman admiring a female leader, but as a human being appreciating a wonderful, well-balanced person. I appreciate and respect who you are for your family, who you are for Northern Trust, and who you are as an active citizen in the community. So, so thank you on behalf of all of us. You give us something to aim for, and we're just really grateful for this time with you tonight. So if everybody wants to, we can unmute and say, yay, thank you out loud. We'll try to do a little community thank you.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck.
Thank you.
Study hard.
Thank you, Michelle. Take care.
All right, everyone. Thanks for your attention. I hope you got some good nuggets you can add to your own leadership practice plan. We'll see you in the morning in either of the 2 tracks that you're in for the Wednesday programming. And congratulations. You've completed day 2 of Leadership Foundations. You're well on your way. We'll see you, everyone, in the morning. Thanks again, Michelle. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Michelle.